She had nothing. No money. No family. No place to sleep. Just a swollen belly, a trash bag full of clothes, and the sound of a door slamming behind her in the middle of January. Her husband, the man who had promised to love her, to protect her, to be there, had just thrown her out of the house they shared. The house she had decorated. The house she had cooked in every single night for 3 years. And do you know what he said before he locked the door? He said, "The baby probably isn't even mine." She stood on that porch in the cold. 7 months pregnant. Shaking. Not from the temperature. From the realization that the life she thought she had built was never real. Now here's the part that nobody talks about. Here's the thing that makes this story different from every other sad story you've ever heard. Because 3 weeks later, she would be sitting inside a mansion that costs more than most people make in a lifetime. Being protected by men who didn't ask questions. Being taken care of by someone who had no reason to help her, but did anyway. And that someone had a reputation that would make your blood run cold. Stay with me, because this story goes to places you won't expect. And by the end of it, you're going to understand something about desperation, about power, and about the kind of loyalty that only reveals itself when everything else has already burned down. Let's go back to the beginning. Her name was Elena. She was 26 years old, the kind of woman who smiled at strangers in grocery stores and remembered the names of every server who brought her food. She had grown up in a mid-sized city in Eastern Europe. One of those places where the winters are brutal, and the people are either incredibly warm or completely hollow. No in-between. Her parents were working class. Her father drove a delivery truck. Her mother cleaned offices at night and slept during the day and somehow still found time to braid Elena's hair before school every morning. They weren't rich, but they were present. And that, Elena would later say, was the greatest gift anyone ever gave her. She had studied accounting at a local university, not because she was passionate about numbers, but because she was practical. She wanted stability. She wanted to build something solid, something that couldn't be taken away. She graduated at 22, got a job at a small financial firm, and met Marcus at a work conference when she was 23. Marcus. That name. Let's stay on it for a second. Because Marcus was everything that looked like an answer to someone who had grown up watching their parents struggle. He was 31. Handsome in that sharp, deliberate kind of way. Like someone who knew exactly which angle to stand at. He wore expensive watches but didn't talk about them. He drove a nice car but called it just transportation. He was charming without being obvious about it, which is somehow the most dangerous kind of charming there is. He had his own import business. He traveled. He had opinions about wine and architecture, and said them with the kind of confidence that makes you think the person has really lived. Elena was not naive. She wasn't. But she was hungry for something she couldn't name. And Marcus looked exactly like that thing. They dated for 8 months. He was attentive. Thoughtful. He called when he said he would. He remembered small details. He showed up. And then he proposed. Her parents were thrilled. Her mother cried. Her father shook Marcus's hand for a long time without saying anything. The way fathers do when they're trying to see inside a person. They got married in the spring. And for exactly 14 months, everything was fine. Then something shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with small disappearances. Marcus would be gone for a weekend without much explanation. Business trips that didn't quite add up. A second phone she found in the car that he explained away so smoothly it almost felt like she was the one being unreasonable for asking. She told herself she was being paranoid. She got pregnant. And instead of bringing them closer, the way she had secretly hoped, something in Marcus seemed to close off entirely. He started coming home late. He stopped asking her how she felt. He would sit at dinner looking at his phone like she wasn't in the room. Like the woman carrying his child was just furniture. She tried to talk to him about it. Twice. 3 times. He would listen, nod, say the right things, and then go back to being exactly the same. By month 7 of her pregnancy, Elena had started sleeping in the guest room. Not because anyone told her to, but because lying next to someone who has decided to be absent, while you're physically in the room, is somehow lonelier than being alone. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. Elena remembers it as a Thursday because she had just come back from a prenatal appointment alone. Marcus had a meeting, and she was carrying a small bag of groceries and a folder of ultrasound pictures, and trying not to feel the weight of the silence in the house. She opened the front door and stopped. There was a woman in her kitchen. Not a stranger. That would have been almost easier. It was someone Elena had met before. Twice, actually. At work events Marcus had brought her to. A woman named Daria. Tall. Pale. The kind of beautiful that looks like it requires maintenance. Daria was standing at the kitchen counter. In Elena's kitchen. Pouring herself a glass of wine from a bottle Elena didn't recognize. Wearing, and this detail still makes Elena's stomach drop when she talks about it, one of Marcus's shirts. Elena didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the doorway with her grocery bag and her ultrasound pictures, and looked at this woman for a long moment. And Daria looked back at her with an expression that wasn't guilt. It was almost boredom. Marcus came down the stairs 30 seconds later. He saw Elena. He saw the look on her face. And instead of collapsing, instead of apologizing, instead of doing anything that a person with a conscience would do, he sighed. Like she was inconvenient. Elena, he said. We should talk. That sentence. That calm, measured, already decided sentence. She understood in that moment that this had not been an accident. This had not been a moment of weakness. This was a situation Marcus had already processed, already made peace with, and was now simply ready to deliver to her. The conversation that followed lasted 45 minutes. He talked for most of it. He used words like grow apart and needs and complicated feelings. He spoke about himself with so much careful attention, so much deliberate self-analysis, that there was almost no room left in the conversation for Elena to exist as a person. When she tried to say something, when she started to cry, finally, and asked him what about the baby, what about their child, he said something she has never been able to forget. He said, I've been thinking about that. And honestly, Elena, I don't know if this pregnancy was planned or if it was a way to keep me. So. That one word. That small, terrible word. So. Like her grief was a logical problem he had already moved past. She asked him to leave. He said he wasn't leaving, it was his house. She asked where she was supposed to go. He said that wasn't really his problem to solve. She stood there for a moment. Then she went upstairs. She took the trash bag from under the bathroom sink. She filled it with whatever fit. She came back downstairs. Marcus was already back on his phone. She walked out the door. He didn't follow her. Now, before we go any further, I need you to notice something. Because there are two open threads in this story right now, and they're both about to collide in a way that will completely change everything. The first thread. Elena is 7 months pregnant, on the street, in January, with nowhere to go. The second thread. Marcus is not who he appeared to be. That import business? Those unexplained trips? The second phone? We're going to come back to all of that. Because Marcus had made enemies. Quietly. Steadily. Over years. And those enemies were about to become very relevant. But first, Elena needs somewhere to sleep. She called her mother. Her mother answered immediately, the way mothers always do when they somehow already know something is wrong. Elena told her what happened. Her mother started to cry and told her to come home. Come right now, come tonight. But her parents lived 4 hours away. Elena had no car. Marcus had always driven. She had her debit card, which she quickly checked and found had been frozen. Not yet. But checking it, she could feel what was coming. She had $93 in cash in her wallet. She checked into a motel near the edge of the city. Room 11. A room that smelled like old carpet and someone else's choices. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her hands on her stomach, and she talked to her baby. She said, "We're going to be okay." She didn't know if she believed it yet. But she said it anyway. 3 days passed. Her mother wired her enough money to get a bus ticket home. Elena was supposed to leave on a Saturday morning. Friday night, she couldn't sleep. She went to the vending machine at the end of the motel hallway around midnight. And on the way back, she slipped. The hallway had a patch of wet floor, no sign, no warning. And her feet went out from under her. She didn't fall fully. She caught herself against the wall. but the impact sent a sharp pain through her side, and she stood there for a moment, pressing her hand to her stomach, terrified in a way that has no name. The baby moved. She felt it. A flutter, then a kick, like the baby was answering her. She went back to her room. She breathed. She told herself everything was fine. But in the morning, there was a pain that hadn't been there before. And by the time she got to the bus station, it had gotten worse. She didn't get on the bus. She went to the emergency room instead. The hospital was public, crowded, the kind of place where you sit in a plastic chair for a long time before anyone looks at you. She sat there for 3 hours. She filled out forms. She listed her insurance, which was through Marcus's work. And when she called to verify, she was told the policy had been updated 2 days ago and her name had been removed. 2 days ago. The day after he threw her out. She sat with that for a moment. Then she put it away. She had to. Because falling apart was a luxury she could not afford right now. A nurse eventually brought her back. A young doctor checked her over. The baby was fine. There was some bruising on her side, minor cramping from stress and the fall, but nothing that required admission. The doctor, a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a gentle voice, asked Elena if she had someone to call. Elena said her mother, but she was 4 hours away. The doctor wrote something on a card. A shelter. A women's crisis center about 20 minutes from the hospital. She said, they take pregnant women. They're good people. Call ahead. Elena took the card. She called. They had 1 bed. She took a cab. The shelter was a converted house on a quiet street. 3 floors. A small garden in the back that was frozen solid. Inside, there was warmth and the smell of soup and a woman at the front desk named Rosa who checked her in without making her feel small, which in that moment felt like an extraordinary act of grace. There were 6 other women staying there at the time, each one carrying her own version of the same story. Different details. Same wound. Elena stayed there for 5 days. And on the 5th day, something happened that she still can't entirely explain. A woman came to the shelter asking about her. Not by her full name. By description. Pregnant woman. Mid-20s. Came in recently from the city center area. Rosa, who was nobody's fool, told the woman she couldn't confirm or deny that anyone matching that description was there. The woman handed Rosa a card. Rosa brought the card to Elena. It was plain white. No logo. No title. Just a name and a phone number. The name on the card was Vera. Elena didn't recognize it. She asked Rosa who the woman was. Rosa looked at the card for a moment, then looked at Elena with an expression that was hard to read. Not fear exactly. More like the expression of someone who has just realized they're standing closer to something large and powerful than they realized. I don't know her, Rosa said. But the car she came in? I've only ever seen cars like that outside 2 kinds of places. Embassies. And places you don't ask about. Elena stared at the card. She turned it over. On the back in small, precise handwriting, was a single sentence. You are not as alone as he made you feel. Now. Stop. Because this is the moment the story changes direction. And you need to understand something before we go further. Elena had no idea who Vera was. She had no idea why anyone would be looking for her. She was a 26-year-old accountant from a working-class family who had made the mistake of marrying the wrong man. She wasn't connected. She wasn't special. She wasn't, as far as she knew, on anyone's radar. So why was someone looking for her? And what did Marcus have to do with it? Because remember, I told you Marcus had made enemies. Quietly. Over years. We're about to open that up. Elena called the number. Vera answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm. Measured. The kind of calm that isn't relaxed. It's controlled. Like someone who has trained themselves to sound that way regardless of the situation. She said she worked for someone who had become aware of Elena's situation. She said this person wanted to offer Elena a safe place to stay while she got back on her feet. She said there was no obligation. No strings. And that if Elena decided she wasn't comfortable, a car would take her wherever she wanted to go, no questions asked. Elena asked who this person was. Vera said his name was Nikolai. The name meant nothing to Elena. She asked what Nikolai's connection was to her situation. Vera paused. A deliberate pause. The kind that tells you the person on the other end is deciding how much to say. Then she said, "He knew your husband. And he is not fond of men who do what your husband did." That was all. Elena sat with the phone in her hand for a long time after the call ended. She thought about her options. She had a bus ticket she hadn't used. She had a mother 4 hours away who was worried sick. She had a shelter bed that was needed by someone else and a bruised rib, and a baby due in 8 weeks and $93 in a savings account that Marcus hadn't gotten to yet. She thought about that sentence on the back of the card. "You are not as alone as he made you feel." She called Vera back. She said yes. The car that came for her was black, clean, and completely silent on the inside. The driver didn't make small talk. He wasn't unfriendly, he was simply efficient. Like every movement he made had been stripped of anything unnecessary. They drove for about 40 minutes. Out of the city. Into the kind of countryside that feels older than everything around it. Roads flanked by heavy trees, long stone walls, the occasional glow of a house set far back from the road. And then through a gate. And up a long driveway. And Elena saw it. The house. Calling it a house is technically accurate, and also completely insufficient. It was 3 stories of stone and glass, framed by old oak trees, lit from below in a way that made it look like something from a dream or a film. The kind of building that communicates, without saying a word, that the person inside it exists by a completely different set of rules than the world you came from. Elena pressed her hand to her stomach. She whispered, "Okay. We're going in." Vera was waiting at the front door. She was 40, maybe 45. Silver-streaked hair pulled back. Dark eyes that took inventory of Elena in about 3 seconds without being unkind about it. She showed Elena to a room on the 2nd floor. Large. Warm. A bed that looked like it had been made by someone who took beds seriously. A bathroom attached. Fresh towels. On the bedside table. A glass of water, a plate of food wrapped in cloth, and a small note that said rest. "We talk tomorrow." Elena sat on the edge of the bed and felt the baby kick. She ate the food. She drank the water. She slept for 11 hours. In the morning, she met Nikolai. Now, before I tell you about that meeting, I need to give you context. Because the word mafia is one of those words that people use so casually, so cinematically, that it's lost most of its weight. People say it and they picture movie posters. Dramatic music. Slow-motion violence. The reality is different. The reality is quieter. More bureaucratic. More human. And therefore sometimes more frightening. Nikolai was not a movie character. He was 53 years old. Not tall, medium height, medium build, the kind of man you would walk past in a market without a second look. Gray at the temples. A face that had lines in it from, you got the sense, both laughter and very serious decisions. He was sitting in a large kitchen, not a formal room, a kitchen, when Vera brought Elena down. He was drinking coffee and reading something on a tablet, and he looked up when she came in and stood immediately, which surprised her. He gestured to the chair across from him. He said in accented but careful English, "How did you sleep?" She said, "Better than I have in weeks." He nodded. He poured her a cup of tea without asking if she wanted one. He set it in front of her. And then he told her the truth. Not all of it. But enough. Marcus's import business was not entirely what it seemed. Over the course of the last 2 years, Marcus had made several business arrangements with people connected to Nikolai's network. Not Nikolai directly, with people adjacent to him. Supply chain work. Logistics. The details were intentionally vague, but the shape of it was clear. Marcus had taken money. He had misrepresented what he could deliver. He had at a certain point simply stopped responding to the people he owed. This was in the world Nikolai operated in, not a clerical error. It was a statement of intent. It was a choice. And Marcus had apparently decided, incorrectly, that the people he'd wronged were far enough removed from real power that he could simply disappear the arrangement and move on with his life. He was wrong. Nikolai had become aware of Marcus's situation through these channels. And when he became aware of Marcus's situation, he also became aware, through channels Elena could not entirely picture, of what Marcus had done to his pregnant wife 3 weeks prior. Elena asked him why that mattered to him. Nikolai was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Elena has thought about almost every day since. He said, I have done many things in my life that I cannot undo. I have made choices that hurt people who did not deserve to be hurt. I cannot fix those things. But sometimes, when the opportunity appears, I can make a different choice. A small one. And that is what I am doing. Elena looked at him for a long time. She said, What do you want in return? He said, Nothing. Only that you take care of the child. She didn't fully believe him. Not yet. But she stayed. The next 4 weeks were unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. She had a room. She had food. She had medical care. A doctor who came to the house every few days. A woman named Dr. Petrov who was no-nonsense and thorough, and spoke to Elena like she was a full human being, which after weeks of being made to feel like an inconvenience, landed harder than Elena expected. The house had 15 people in it at any given time. Most of them were men. Most of them were quiet. They worked in shifts, it seemed, some outside, some inside, and the rhythm of the house had a kind of military precision to it that was both unsettling and oddly comforting. No one asked Elena questions. No one made her feel like a guest who had overstayed. She moved through the house freely, ate in the kitchen when she was hungry, sat in the garden when the weather allowed, and slowly, against her own expectations, she began to feel safe. Not safe in the naive way she had once felt safe with Marcus. Not the safety that comes from convincing yourself everything is fine. This was a different kind of safety. The kind that comes from paying attention and realizing the people around you are capable. Whatever else they are, whatever else they've done, they are not going to let anything happen to you. It was strange. And she knew it was strange. And she held that strangeness in one hand and the security in the other, and she let herself breathe. She and Nikolai had breakfast together most mornings. She learned things about him slowly. The way you learn things about someone when neither of you is performing for the other. He had grown up in a small city that no longer existed. It had been part of a region that was restructured after the fall of the Soviet Union, and renamed twice and was now barely a town. He had started working at 14. He had lost 2 brothers. He had never married. He had, he said once, loved someone when he was very young, but she had made a sensible choice and married someone safe, and he did not blame her for it. He asked Elena about her life, about her parents, about her work. He asked about the baby, whether she knew the sex yet. She did, a girl, whether she had a name. She said she was thinking about Anna, after her grandmother. He said it was a good name. She asked him once, directly because she was too tired for anything else, whether he was dangerous. He looked out the window for a moment. He said, Yes, I have been. The danger is not something I can make disappear by wanting to. But it is not pointed at you. She believed him. She still isn't entirely sure why. But here's what was happening in the background while Elena was slowly finding her footing. Marcus was unraveling. Not quietly. Not gracefully. He had apparently believed, with the staggering self-assurance of a man who has never truly been held accountable, that removing Elena from his life was a clean break. That it would all just settle. That he would go forward with Daria and the import business and the expensive watches and the whole careful architecture of his persona, and Elena would simply go away and not be a problem. What he had not accounted for was the fact that the people he had stolen from did not forget. Nikolai had not touched Marcus. Not directly. That wasn't the point. The point was that word had moved, the quiet, efficient movement of information in closed networks. And suddenly Marcus's business contacts were becoming unavailable. Deals were falling through. A bank he relied on for a line of credit sent a letter about restructuring their client portfolio. His landlord, the one who owned the warehouse that was central to his operation, called to say the lease would not be renewed. None of it was provably connected to anything. But Marcus knew. He knew the way you know when you're being watched. That prickling at the back of your neck. That sudden awareness that the walls of your life are not as solid as you thought. He called Elena. She didn't answer. He called again. She let it go to voicemail. He left a message that started as an apology and somewhere in the middle became an accusation. And by the end was just a man realizing, possibly for the first time, that he was genuinely afraid. She listened to it once. Then she blocked his number. But the voicemail told her something important. He said, I don't know who you're with or what you've told them, but this needs to stop. Elena. This needs to stop right now. Who you're with. He knew something. Or suspected it. He had connected Elena's disappearance to the walls closing in around him. And while he had the wrong picture, Elena hadn't arranged anything, hadn't asked for anything. The fear in his voice was real. She played the message for Nikolai. He listened to it with his eyes on the middle distance, and his coffee cup held very still. When it finished, he set the cup down. He said, he is a small man who borrowed the appearance of something larger. Now the appearance is dissolving. He looked at Elena. He said, you are not responsible for that. She nodded, but she felt something complicated anyway. Not guilt. Not grief. Something more like the strange, heavy clarity of watching a story you were trapped inside finally reach its conclusion from the outside. And then 2 weeks later, the baby came early. Not dangerously early. Not a crisis. But earlier than expected. Elena was 37 weeks when her water broke on a Tuesday morning in the house on the hill. Vera was there immediately. Dr. Petrov was called. The room that had been quietly prepared over the previous week was ready within minutes. Elena labored for 9 hours. She told me later that the thing she remembers most is not the pain, though there was pain significant and real, but the fact that at some point during those 9 hours, she looked up and Vera was sitting in the chair beside her, holding her hand, and Vera's face was composed but her eyes were wet. This woman, who had been efficient and measured and professionally calm since the first moment Elena had met her, was crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just wetness at the corners of her eyes, which she made no move to wipe away. And Elena, between contractions, had asked, do you have children? And Vera had said, I had a daughter. Yes. And Elena had understood from the tense of that sentence everything that needed to be understood. And she had squeezed Vera's hand tighter. And Vera had squeezed back, and they had stayed like that. At 11:47 p.m., Anna was born. She came into the world loudly, furiously, already indignant at the temperature and the brightness and the tremendous inconvenience of existence. Dr. Petrov laid her on Elena's chest. Elena looked down at this tiny, red, furious face. And she said for the second time, we're going to be okay. This time she believed it. 3 days after Anna was born, Nikolai came to Elena's room. He knocked. He waited. He came in and stood near the door with his hands clasped. And he looked at the baby for a long moment without saying anything. Then he said, she looks strong. Elena said, she's been shouting since she got here, so yes. He smiled. It was a real smile. The kind that reaches the eyes and stays there for a moment. He told her he had arranged some things. An apartment in a nearby city. Small but good. In a safe building, with a doorman, in a neighborhood with a park. 3 months of rent paid in advance. A bank account with enough in it to cover her expenses while she figured out next steps with work. A contact at a financial firm who was expecting her call when she was ready. And then, and this is the detail that broke Elena when she tells this story, a letter. A handwritten letter, folded in a plain envelope, addressed to Anna. He handed it to Elena. He said, for her. When she is old enough. Or when you decide she is old enough. Elena held the envelope. She asked him what it said. He said, nothing important. Only that she was wanted. Before she was even here. That is all. Elena cried then. Properly. The kind of crying that has been building for weeks and needs somewhere to go. She didn't apologize for it. Nikolai didn't try to stop her or smooth it over or make it smaller. He just waited. The way you wait for something that needs to happen. When she finished, she asked him, why? Still. Why really? He sat down in the chair beside the bed. He laced his fingers together. He looked at the baby for a moment. Then he said, my mother was a woman like you. Young. Left alone. No one helped her. She did everything herself, and it cost her everything she had, and she died before she should have. I could not help her. I was a child. I could not do anything except watch. He looked at Elena. I am not a child now. There was no dramatic music. No meaningful pause designed for effect. Just a man sitting in a chair telling the truth in the most uncomplicated way he could. Elena looked at him for a long time. She said, "Thank you." He said, "Take care of Anna." He stood. He walked to the door. He turned back once, looked at the baby one more time. Then he left. Now, before we get to what happened next, I need to address the thing some of you are already thinking. Because I know this story sounds like the setup for something. Like at some point a price will be revealed. Like the man with the mansion and the cars and the network of silent, efficient people was performing an act of generosity that would eventually require repayment. I understand why you'd think that. The world teaches us that nothing is free. Especially from powerful people. Especially when you're vulnerable. The lesson most of us have learned, one way or another, is that kindness from the powerful usually has a signature on it somewhere in small print. Elena thought the same thing. For weeks. She was waiting for it. It never came. What came instead was this. Marcus, 6 weeks after Anna was born, was arrested. Not by Nikolai. Not through anything Nikolai arranged directly. Marcus had, in the process of his business unraveling, made a series of increasingly desperate decisions, including some that crossed lines that had nothing to do with the quiet economic pressure that had been applied to him. He had tried to move some assets quickly, and had done it in a way that attracted the attention of people with badges and jurisdiction. Financial fraud. Wire transfers that didn't survive scrutiny. He was charged. He was held. The case took time, cases always do, but the trajectory was clear. Elena found out through a news alert on her phone. Sitting in her new apartment in the city, with Anna asleep in the next room and a cup of tea getting cold on the table beside her. She sat with it for a long time. She felt, and she'll tell you this if you ask her, almost nothing. Not satisfaction. Not triumph. Not even relief, exactly. She felt something more like, of course. Like watching the last domino in a very long line finally fall. She called her mother. Her mother cried. Her father, in the background, said something short and declarative in their language that Elena translated as, "Good." She called Vera. Vera said, "I know." Of course she did. Elena asked. Did he have anything to do with it? Long pause. Vera said, "The arrest? No. That was Marcus. Marcus made those choices himself." Elena noticed the phrasing. The arrest. As opposed to everything else. She noticed it, and she chose not to pull on that thread. Some things you know without needing to confirm. She said, "Tell him, tell Nikolai, that Anna said her first real sound today. Not a word. But a sound. Like she was practicing." Vera said, "I'll tell him." Elena said, "And tell him she's okay. We're okay." Vera said, "He'll be glad to hear it." Elena lives in that apartment still. Anna is, at the time of this story being told, 2 years old. Running now. Exhaustingly energetic. In love with dogs, with anything yellow, and with a particular book about a bear who loses his button, and looks for it everywhere before realizing it was home all along. Elena went back to work. Financial analysis, consulting work she does partly from home, partly from an office in the city. She is good at her job. She always was. She talks to her mother every day. She visits her parents most months. She has not spoken to Marcus since she blocked his number. The legal proceedings involving him are ongoing. She has received papers and forms and has a lawyer. A woman recommended by Vera, who seems to approach Marcus's case with a particular kind of thorough pleasure. She has not seen Nikolai since that morning in the room when Anna was 3 days old. But she hears from Vera occasionally. A message here, a check-in there. On Anna's first birthday, a gift arrived, a small stuffed bear, good quality, no card, but Elena knew. She told Anna, "A friend sent this." Anna hugged the bear. Elena kept the letter. The one addressed to Anna. It sits in a drawer in her bedroom sealed waiting. She doesn't know when she'll give it to her daughter. She thinks about it sometimes. She thinks about the conversation that will come with it. The explaining she'll have to do about who Nikolai is, what he does, the complicated geometry of the world he inhabits. She doesn't have the words for that yet. But she will. Now here is what I want you to take from this story. Not the obvious thing. Not good triumphs, or karma is real, or any of the comfortable conclusions we reach for, because they make us feel like the universe is organized in a way that rewards the deserving. I want you to take something harder than that. Elena survived not because someone saved her. She survived because she made decisions. She made the decision to get out of the house with what she could carry. She made the decision to go to the emergency room instead of the bus station. She made the decision to call Vera back. She made the decision, every single day in that house on the hill, to stay alert, to ask questions, to never fully stop watching the situation she was in. She was helped, significantly, by someone who didn't need to help her and did anyway. That matters. That's real. But she was not passive in her own story. And that distinction, between being saved and being helped while you save yourself, that is the distinction that Elena carries with her now. Here's the other thing. Nikolai. We use words like good and bad because they're convenient. Because they give us clear lanes. We want the people who do harmful things to also be irredeemably everything, so we don't have to sit with the discomfort of the alternative. But Nikolai is a man who has done things that caused harm. He lives in a world that causes harm. That is true. And it doesn't disappear. And he is also a man who looked at a pregnant woman on the street in January and made a different choice than the one no one would have blamed him for. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The capacity for harm and the capacity for grace can exist in the same person. That's not an endorsement of what he does. It's an acknowledgement that human beings are not simple. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is hold two true things that don't entirely fit together, and not try to resolve them into something cleaner than they are. And then there's Marcus. Let's stay on Marcus for a moment because he's the easiest character in this story, and therefore the one most worth examining. Marcus did what cowards do when they've been pretending. He discarded the evidence. He erased the person who reflected back to him everything he didn't want to be. He thought that was strength. It was the opposite. Real strength. And I mean this in the most stripped-down, non-motivational poster way I can say it. Real strength is accountability. It's looking at what you've done and deciding to do differently. It's hard. It is the hardest thing there is. Because it requires you to be bigger than your own ego. Marcus never got there. Maybe he will. In the space of time that a fraud case affords you for reflection. Maybe he won't. But Elena isn't waiting to find out either way. And that is perhaps the most important thing she did. She stopped making her future conditional on his choices. She stopped building herself around the shape of his absence or presence or guilt or lack of it. She just left the orbit entirely and started her own. One more thing. The women at the shelter. The 6 women Elena met in those 5 days. She thinks about them regularly. She doesn't know most of their stories. She barely spoke to some of them. But she knows what they were carrying because she was carrying it too. And weight like that is recognizable across languages and circumstances. Not all of them had a Vera come looking for them. Not all of them had a Nikolai who happened to have a complicated history with the man who'd hurt them. Some of them left that shelter and went to harder places and faced harder things, and didn't have the sequence of strange luck and small graces that Elena had. She knows this. And she carries it. She volunteers at that same shelter now, 3 afternoons a month. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't post about it. She just shows up. She sits with women who are in the place she was in, and she is present with them the way Rosa was present with her, without making them feel small, without making her own story into a lesson she's trying to deliver to them. She just shows up. Because sometimes that is everything. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not in a performative way. I mean it genuinely. Stories like this one are hard to sit with. They ask something of you. They ask you to hold complexity and resist the pull toward easy conclusions. They ask you to feel something and not immediately explain the feeling away. If this story moved you, if something in it caught somewhere inside you, I want to ask you to do one thing before you scroll away. Think of one person in your life who might be in a moment like Elena's. Not necessarily as dramatic. Not necessarily as visible. Maybe it's someone you haven't checked on in a while. Maybe it's someone who has been quietly carrying something that you sensed but didn't ask about. Maybe it's someone who said, "I'm fine," in a way that meant the opposite. Send them something today. A message. A call. A knock on a door. You don't have to have a mansion. You don't have to have answers or resources or a plan. Sometimes the thing that changes a person's story is just the knowledge that someone noticed, that someone looked in their direction and didn't look away. You are not as alone as he made you feel. That sentence was written on a card for Elena, but I think it belongs to a lot more people than her. Pass it on. If you want more stories like this, human, real, complicated, told without the edges sanded off, subscribe. Hit the bell. Leave a comment below telling me which part of this story stayed with you. I read every comment. And I'll see you in the next one.